Do you ever sit down to practice English or your other target language and you just don't have the motivation? You feel lost, burnt out, like you don't know where you're going? If you do, don't worry. In this episode of English from the North, we're going to be having a look at motivation and how you can stay motivated. If you want to hear that, stick around. So once more, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Lewis. Before we go on, the link to the transcript is in the description below. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. This week, I just returned from my holidays. I said in the previous couple of episodes I'd be on holiday in Spain, in Elche. Had a fantastic time. I'm going to do a little sort of retrospective review of my holiday because really it was fantastic. However, I think on the flight back there was a lot of people sort of coughing and spluttering and all that kind of stuff, so I may have caught something from the flight back, so apologies if my voice sounds a bit more, well, even more gravelly than usual. I think I might have a bit of a cold coming on. So yeah, like I said, the link to the transcript is in the description, and let's get into the subject today. So motivation. Why have I decided to talk about motivation today? Well, actually, this came up fairly recently. This week I was sort of having a conversation with some friends about sort of learning languages and things like that, because some of them are thinking about getting started. They want to do it for various reasons, but they don't really know where to start. Or at least one of my friends said that, you know, he wishes he could do it. He wishes he had the time. And ultimately, that's kind of the major thing when it comes to learning languages, because like I said to them, you know, physically, like the process of learning a language, the actual things that you need to do, it's fairly straightforward. I've spoken about it in other episodes of the podcast, what I use to learn languages, sort of comprehensible input and all this kind of stuff, and it's really quite straightforward, the actual process. You know, you start with beginner level texts and audios and things like that. You listen to them, you understand them, you acquire the language, you build up this base. You can use flashcards to reinforce what you've listened to, what you've learned, use apps as well, and then you go into your speaking lessons and you just basically reproduce what you've heard, which helps to reinforce it, and then on and on and on, and the cycle repeats and repeats and repeats, and things get, you know, you just start to build on what you know. Obviously there are some difficulties there. Finding resources, for example, can, depending on the language, be a bit trickier than other languages. Although nowadays with AI, for example, you can use things like ChatGPT to generate stories if there isn't content in your native language. I'm going to do an episode on AI at some point, because when I start to learn Catalan in 2025, I plan on using AI a lot to help with the sort of relative, not lack of resources, but sort of, what do we say, the scarcity of resources compared to languages like French and Spanish and things like that. But the point is that sort of the physical process, I guess you could say, is relatively straightforward. I mean, there will also be other difficulties if you need to learn another language, and well, a language with another alphabet, I should say. But even then, you know, I've talked about the video from this YouTube channel called Polyglot a lot. It's a man who learned to speak Arabic in 1 year, and he learned to speak Arabic without even learning how to read it. So I mean, it is possible. But even then, you know, even with a different alphabet, it's just a case of memorizing the letters, which is something with enough repetition, enough flashcards, you're going to be able to do. But ultimately, the hard thing is this motivation. It's this staying motivated. As I say to people who normally speak to me and say, oh, I wish I could learn a language. I wish I could learn another language. And I always point out to them and say, well, you're saying that in fluent English. You know, you're saying to me, oh, I wish I could learn another language. In a language that they are fluent in. I believe that everybody has the capability to learn a language. I don't agree with this idea that some people are better at learning languages than others. I think everybody has the same, you know, capability. Everybody has the same ability. Really, everybody could learn 5 languages if they have the time. I mean, if you look at countries, like there are various African countries where they'll have an official language like French or English, and they'll have about 4 or 5 local languages. If you look, and these people will be able to speak sort of at least 5 languages like daily on a regular basis. If you look at countries like Switzerland in Europe, for example, it's the people there speak, well, I'm not 100% sure, but you know, at least sort of French or German and English, and normally all 3, sometimes also Italian as well. There are lots of Spanish. We talked about Spain again. People in Spain, different parts of Spain, can speak, you know, Catalan, Spanish and English, or Basque, Spanish and English. So it is possible, you know, it is possible. It's just a question of sort of time and having the right environment and the right methods as well. The right methods help a lot. But it's this main thing. It's time. Time is the main way. It's this having the motivation and staying dedicated and being able to dedicate the time. And that's what I say to people. I say, well, learning a language isn't hard. Like I said, reading the novels and listening to the audios and things like that's not difficult, and it should be fun. It should be engaging. You should like to do it, The hard part is being able to dedicate half an hour every day, for example, or doing it every single day, or doing a little bit every single day. To give you an example, I've recently hit, I think it's 702 or 703 days of studying Spanish in a row. Now, that's not 702 days of studying 2 hours every day. That would be, that would be insane. That would be too much, and I would get burnt out. But that is like all these days of doing, at the very least, a little bit every day. Even if it's just 5 minutes of flashcards, it's something that sort of keeps it ticking over. But for me, I find it quite easy. But I realise that, for everybody, for most people, that's not going to be the case. So what can you do to keep yourself motivated? What are the things that you can do to help you to motivate yourself, to keep you on track, to keep you doing a little bit every day? There are some techniques that you can look at. One I particularly like was one that I've heard from Lionel Jr., who has the podcast I'm Polyglot, and what he says is that he will do at least a little bit every day, and sometimes he will have an off day where he doesn't do anything. But if he has an off day, then what he does is the next day he must do something. So he never has 2 days off in a row, but he can have off days, but never two in a row. If he misses a day, then he will always do something the next day. And even if it is something little, even if it is just 5-10 minutes of flashcards, something is better than nothing. So already there we have a technique that you can use to stay motivated, to stay in the zone and keep things sort of ticking over. One other thing that I really like to use is something called setting goals that are SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym. If you ever go to apply for a job in the UK, by the way, you should use this kind of thing. It's the HR and people like that. They love this kind of corporate talk. It's really where it comes from, this kind of corporate world of sort of all this kind of stuff, all this sort of corporate speak, we would say. So SMART is an acronym, and it stands for 5 things. So it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So what does that mean? What does it mean to set a SMART goal? Well, we're going to have a look at each of these in turn. So specific, first of all, means to set something, well, as it says on the tin, specific. Okay, you set a goal which is, you have a very precise idea in mind of what you want to achieve. So a bad example of this would be to say, I want to be fluent in a language, because really, how do you measure fluency? Is that sort of B1, C1, C2? Is that being able to talk without fail? You can't really measure that one. So a good goal for that instead would be something like, I want to be a B1 level in Spanish, for example, because you can measure that, you can sit an exam, so it's a specific goal, you have a specific level. The next one, measurable, kind of already said that. You can use something to measure the progress. So for example, you can say something like that you're going to, pass the exam, and you want to pass the B1 exam, and that'll help you to measure your progress. You can have a look at time studying apps, the amount of practice exercises you've done for the exam, for example, to see how you're progressing on the route. The next one, attainable. Again, it's it's realistic, you can do it. So again, saying you want to reach a B1 level would be attainable, because either you pass the exam or you don't, kind of thing. They are for relevant. Is the goal relevant to you? So for example, do you need to get this B1 level? Maybe you need Spanish for your daily life. Maybe you're working, and in that case, it would be relevant. It's not the end of the world if your goal isn't super relevant. But then again, it's the kind of thing that helps to keep your motivation high. If it's something that you're gonna benefit from in your daily life, so it's always better. So for example, with me, I'm taking the C1 level exam in Spanish in May. I've just booked it and paid the fee and everything yesterday, so it's on. We're doing it in a few months' time. It's not super relevant for me. I don't need this exam, but it's I kind of want it just to have, basically. So again, an example of a goal there where it's not like super relevant, but again, it's keeping me motivated in other ways, because it's something that I want to achieve, and so I'm doing it there. And then finally, timely. It's this other thing. T stands for timely, for having, everything in like an achievable time frame. Basically, it's that, well, to give my example, again, I'm going to be sitting this exam in May, so I know that I have this time deadline to work with. Other ways that you could do this could be, for example, with something like Ollie Richards' Uncovered Story Learning, Uncovered courses. They are sort of come in blocks of 10 weeks, or well, not 10 weeks, but 10 lessons. But you could do it like that. You could say, well, I'm going to do one chapter a week, and that's what I did basically. I would get the story on the Monday, start reading it on the Monday, and then do the vocabulary stuff on the Monday, the grammar stuff on the Tuesday, the sort of communication, wider language stuff on the Wednesday, the pronunciation stuff on the Thursday, and then review the chapter on the Friday. And then over the course of 10 weeks, I would go through each of the 10 chapters, and that would be my goal there, would be sort of easily set out. I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm looking at, and all that kind of stuff. But that's the point there, is that it's, it's measurable. You can see the progress, you know what you need to do in the time and all that kind of stuff, because it keeps you from getting lost, it keeps you from feeling burnt out and all those kinds of things, all those kinds of emotions. If you're not measuring your goal, if you have an unrealistic goal like, oh, I want to be fluent in a language, but what does fluent actually mean, and how can I get there? What am I going to do? What am I going to use? This is when we start to feel lost. But if you set this goal, then it helps you to say, right, well, I'm going to study for half an hour every day, and I want to have a 10-minute conversation with a native speaker. That's my end goal, is to be able to have a 10-minute conversation with a native speaker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to podcasts for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to spend 20 minutes practicing speaking with an AI like My Teacher AI, or I'm going to record myself and I'm going to, have a look at words I didn't know, and then I'm going to re-record myself and note the words that I don't know. That's quite an interesting technique. It's something I've seen in a few videos on YouTube. What people do is they will say, right, I'm going to talk about some kind of topic for 5 minutes. They record themselves talking. They talk in their target language, and when they don't know a word or whatever, they say in their native language, it's the word that means blah blah, and then they keep talking for the 5 minutes. They go back, they review the clip, any words that they don't know, they look them up, they make flashcards, they practice with them, and they do it a couple of times, adding in the phrases that they do know now, and eventually, they kind of build and build and build. It's quite an interesting technique that you can use for speaking as well. I can't remember the name of the YouTube channel off the top of my head where the guy did it, but in fact, let me just take a quick technical pause and I will look it up. Okay, and we're back. So the name of the channel is Language Lords. Unfortunately, the guy made some really good videos sort of a couple of years ago, and then he just kind of stopped. But that was the video he used, the technique he used. I think the video was the video's called something like, this one exercise made me fluent in French in 30 days. The big disclaimer there though is that he was practicing for 8 hours every day. So if you're going, it is a good technique, but if you're using that technique for 8 hours every day, then yeah, you're going to see rapid progress super quickly. But again, if you can't, if you don't have 8 hours every day to practice, that's fine. If you can only do it for half an hour every day or 15 minutes every day, you're still going to see this progress. You're still going to see your level improve, we say little by little, okay, in various different language, poco a poco, petit a petit, little by little. That's what's important. As long as you're doing something, every day, or maybe you have an off day, but you make sure you do something the day after, you just keep with the consistency. This is the hard thing, is keeping consistent, but hopefully by setting a realistic goal, you'll be able to keep it consistent. You'll be able to stay motivated. You'll be able to keep doing a little bit, at the very least a little bit every day. So we've talked about setting goals and how this can help to keep you motivated. Other ways that you can help to keep you motivated is by having like a reward system, having ways to reward you for your hard work. I wouldn't like to say that you struggle through a boring book or whatever and you get to reward yourself with a fun one or anything like that. That's not really what I mean, because like I've said before, all of your resources should be fun. They should be engaging, because if you don't have engaging resources, then that's when you do start to struggle with motivation. But one thing that you could do, for example, is you could maybe have, if you're reading a certain book and your goal is, I'm going to finish this book, I'm going to read for half an hour every day and I'm going to finish this book, then you could have another book as like a reward. So you could say, for example, that you're reading, I don't know, some sort of, maybe you're reading an English classic and you're reading a book by Charles Dickens or something like that. And you say, right, well, I'm reading this book, I'm really enjoying it, but I'm going to reward myself with a different book that I've seen that I really want to read. Maybe something more modern, something a bit more contemporary. But you could have that there as your sort of other way of motivating you. I'm enjoying this book right now, I'm doing my half an hour every day, but when I finish it, I'm going to read this other book. It's something I've done with my Spanish. I'm sort of reading a bunch of a couple of different books right now. I've ordered Don Quixote, which is due to come at some point. The bookshop is kind of taking their time with it, but that's my motivation to get through the Spanish books that I've got, is that eventually I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna read it, and I'm gonna really enjoy it. So little things like that can keep you motivated. Other things that could keep you motivated would maybe be going away on a trip. You could have that as your goal. I want to learn enough of a language to have a sort of basic conversation, and I'm going to put it to the test by going away and traveling. I spoke about traveling in one of the most recent episodes. I think it'd be not the previous episode, but the one before that. How traveling can really help you to stay motivated, because you can really put it into practice. You can really test out your skills to the max, and it gives you a chance to really practice your language live, we would say. And that can also give you motivation. So on my most recent trip to Elche, I received probably the compliment of a lifetime. I spent the whole time speaking Spanish, was there for 6 days, completely immersed in the language. I didn't speak English once, and I was in a wine bar one night and was just sort of chatting with the waiter on Spanish about these different wines, and I said, back in my country, it can be a real struggle to get wine from various regions in Spain, because normally wines from Rioja, which is this really famous wine producing region in Spain, dominate. There's so many wines from Rioja, but fortunately in Scotland we're starting to get more and more wines from different regions like Castile and Leon and places like that. And he said, oh, wait a minute, so you're Scottish? And I went, yep. And he said, oh, really, I had no idea. I couldn't tell from your Spanish. I thought you were a native speaker. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I said, you made my night. That's like the compliment of a lifetime. It was my birthday as well, so that was a great birthday present to receive. But compliments like that, things like that, can really help you to stay motivated, can really energize you and really give you the energy and the desire to want to keep going. It's interesting because there's another YouTube channel, a guy called Victor Talking, and he speaks a bunch of languages. He's Russian, but he can speak Korean, Mandarin, I think Japanese as well. All of these different, and English as well. All of these different sorts of languages. And he made a video on how to learn a language and how he learns languages and how he stays motivated learning languages. One of the things that he said is, what's so good about languages like Korean, like Mandarin, like Japanese and things like that, is you say the most basic stuff in that language and people are like, oh my god, that's amazing. He said you say like, hello, how are you, and they're very, very complimentary about their languages or about your ability, because they see their language as something that's super difficult to learn and think, and that sort of thing. And what he says is this creates this really good, what we call positive feedback loop. You say these kinds of basic things, you receive this good feedback, and it makes you want to continue. You want to keep speaking it because you want to keep receiving this positive feedback, and so it builds and it builds and it builds. I mean, not every language is going to have the same sort of positive reaction that you're going to receive from like Korean or Chinese or Spanish, for example. You get a lot of positive reactions with languages like Spanish and Portuguese. But again, it's an example of something that you can use to stay motivated. You can use the energy that you get from the people, the positive reactions that you get for the people. So I guess the point here is the motivation is there if you go looking for it. You can use the language itself, you can use the experiences that you have in your language as motivation. You will sometimes have, on the other hand, you will sometimes have negative experiences with the language. Maybe the person doesn't understand what they're saying, maybe they switch to a different language. Something that happens with English speakers trying to learn other languages is that people will switch to English. It's kind of something, the stereotype is it happens with like French in France and things like that. People try and speak to people in French and they'll respond in English, and people can find that a little bit demotivating and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's important there is to, you know, realize is to not feel down about what's happened and all that. Just try to continue. One thing I always do is I just keep speaking the target language. This you can kind of almost force the person to change back into that language. It happened with me in French, you know, a few times. Once they realize that you're not just a tourist, you know, you do have a bit more than a basic level, they can, you know, they're happy to keep going in their native language. I mean, yeah, you will get rude people. It does happen eventually. It does happen, you know, occasionally. Sometimes you do get someone who's just rude, but at the end of the day, you do just need to brush it off. And a lot of people don't speak another language, or they don't speak another language very well, and they don't really understand the process of learning and what it goes through and what it takes and all that kind of thing. So it's important not to be demotivated by this. I don't think even demotivated is a word. I'm not even sure if I'm using the right word, but anyway, you know, happens occasionally even in English. I'm not sure about the words that I'm using, but the point is that, you know, don't feel down when it does happen. Just try and brush it off. It's part of the process, and focus more on all the positive interactions you've had. Focus more on the things that you can do. Say, okay, that one guy was an idiot. That one guy was horrible to me. However, today I have managed to have 10 successful conversations when, you know, all went well. I was able to speak my target language without any problem. And don't let the one negative interaction take away from the 10 positive ones, for example. That's the issue. When you have a negative experience, sometimes it's the thing that, you know, that draws all your attention. You don't think about the dozens of positive experiences that you had. You focus on the one negative one. I mean, it happened with me as a teacher when I was working in that academy online teaching people English, is that, you know, sometimes you would get a bad student who they were rude, they just couldn't be bothered, and they could be quite frustrating. You know, they were there because they had to be, not because they wanted to be. And it did kind of take away from the class, and you could see other students getting frustrated, and it, you know, it wasn't a good experience. But I always told myself, right, this is one person who's been negative. This is one person with a bad attitude. And I'd thought about all the good times I had with the students, all the laughs that I had, all the fantastic students that were super motivated. And there were far more of them than there were of bad students, than there were of students that weren't interested, that couldn't be bothered. And it's that kind of thing. Focus more on the good experiences. Let the good experiences motivate you. Don't be disheartened by the bad experiences, I would say. So I think that just about wraps it up for today. I think we've sort of covered everything for motivation. Again, quite a bit of a rambling episode. I know I kind of went to a bunch of different places. Again, you know, I just sort of have my rough outline and I kind of talk from there. But I hope that you've found the advice in this podcast interesting. Like I said, there are a bunch of YouTube channels I've talked about here. I'll put some links to them in the description below. Like I've already said, the link to the transcript is in the description below, and there's also the link to the Ko-fi if you want to support me, if you want to help me with this project, then, you know, feel free to toss some spare change my way. So that about covers it all for today. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye bye.